The sun bathed Jefferson Park in a soft, golden glow, casting long shadows of swaying trees over worn paths. Laughter from distant children playing mingled with chirping birds. On a lone bench near the edge of a small pond, Alexandra Carter sat quietly, taking a rare moment to enjoy the stillness of the afternoon. Her dark blazer rested beside her, revealing a fitted gray blouse and slacks that masked her athletic frame. A small scar on her forearm, just visible beneath her rolled sleeves, hinted at years of service protecting some of the nation's most powerful leaders. Alexandra's keen eyes scanned her surroundings, not out of fear, but habit. Her time in the Secret Service had honed her instincts, and even now, years after leaving the governor's detail, she couldn't help but notice the small details. The awkward shuffle of a man yards away, a group lingering too long near the playground. Across the park, four men loitered near an old oak tree, their laughter sharp and mean, cutting through the tranquil ambience. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a black hoodie, leaned against the tree, surveying the park like a predator. If you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing for more thrilling content like this. Marcus Tank Wilson wasn't the kind of man who blended in. His shaved head gleamed in the sun, and the faded tattoo snaking up his neck hinted at a life lived on society's edges. He nudged the man beside him, a wiry figure with a patchy beard, and gestured toward Alexandra. "That one?" Tank muttered, his voice carrying a sneer. "Sitting there all smug like she owns the place. Easy pickings." Patchy Beard chuckled, cracking his knuckles. "Think she'll put up a fight?" Tank smirked. "She'll try. They always do." Alexandra felt their eyes on her before she saw them. A subtle prickle ran down her spine, the same sensation she'd felt countless times while protecting the governor. Her body tensed imperceptibly as she turned her head, catching their gaze for just a moment. They didn't look away. That was her first confirmation they were trouble. She kept her posture relaxed, one arm draped over the bench's back, the other resting on her lap. Her breathing remained steady, but her mind began to assess. For of them, broad shoulders on the leader, wiry build on the second, the other two younger, maybe early 20s, with cocky postures that screamed overconfidence. A mix of cheap cologne and cigarettes wafted over on the breeze, confirming their proximity. "All right, gentlemen," Alexandra muttered under her breath, a hint of a wry smile forming. "Let's see what you've got. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories." The men began to move, their conversation growing louder as they crossed the park toward her. Their laughter carried over the playground, drawing the attention of passersby who quickly looked away, uninterested in getting involved. Tank walked in front, his stride slow and deliberate. Patchy Beard and the two younger men flanked him like wolves circling prey. Alexandra didn't flinch. Instead, she shifted slightly, making herself look just vulnerable enough to tempt them further. Her instincts, honed through years of protective detail work, told her these men were used to picking off easy targets, feeding on fear. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Yet, Tank reached the edge of the path near Alexandra's bench, his boots crunching against the gravel. His smirk widened, exposing teeth stained from years of cigarettes and cheap coffee. Behind him, Patchy Beard chuckled while the two younger men exchanged glances, their excitement barely contained. "Afternoon, ma'am," Tank said, his voice oily and dripping with mock politeness. "Mighty nice day for sitting out here all alone, don't you think?" Alexandra looked up slowly, her expression calm, her eyes narrowing just enough to convey she wasn't intimidated. "It was," she said evenly. "What do you want?" Tank chuckled, glancing back at his crew as if Alexandra had told a joke. "Now that's no way to greet friendly folks just out for a chat. You got something against a few good old boys stopping to say hi?" Patchy Beard leaned closer, his grin revealing yellowed teeth. "Or maybe she's just one of them types, Tank, thinking she's too good to talk to the likes of us. If you're enjoying this intense scene, hit that subscribe button for more." Alexandra didn't answer. Her gaze darted between them, reading their postures, calculating distances. They were close now, too close. Close enough that any sudden move could spark the conflict she knew was brewing. Her years of protecting high-profile targets had taught her to recognize the telltale signs of impending violence. "You hear me, lady?" Patchy Beard's voice turned sharp. "You think you're better than us?" One of the young men, his face flushed with sunburn, sneered. "Bet she's one of those uppity ones, thinking this park belongs to her kind now." Alexandra's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't think anything belongs to me. I'm just sitting here, minding my business." "Oh, you hear that, boys?" Tank drawled, stepping closer. "She's just minding her business. Guess we'll mind it for her." He pointed at the bag resting beside Alexandra on the bench. "That's a nice bag. Bet it's got something good in it. Why don't you be polite and hand it over? We wouldn't want things to get messy." Alexandra's lips twitched almost imperceptibly into a faint smirk. "Is that what you call polite these days? Stealing from people who look like me?" Tank's face darkened, the fake smile dropping. "Now what's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," Alexandra shot back, her voice cold. "You didn't pick me because I'm sitting alone. You picked me because you think I'm an easy target." Stay tuned for what happens next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The younger man stepped closer, his voice rising with anger. "You got a mouth on you, huh? Probably the same one you use to cry discrimination every time things don't go your way." Alexandra stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. The shift in height gave her a presence they weren't expecting. She was shorter than Tank but carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had stood between threats and presidents. Her calm, unwavering gaze unsettled them, though none would admit it. "You really think this is going to go the way you planned?" she said quietly, her tone measured, each word a challenge. "Walk away while you still can." Patchy Beard laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness to it. "Look at her trying to play tough. What are you going to do, lady? Call the cops? Like they'd show up for someone like you." The younger men joined in the laughter, and emboldened by the twisted camaraderie of their group, Tank stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. He was no longer playing around. The air between them thickened with unspoken tension, and Alexandra felt the shift. This was the moment. "I don't think you're listening, lady," Tank said, his voice low and venomous. "We're taking that bag, and maybe we'll take something else too." Alexandra's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the anticipation of what was to come. Her Secret Service instincts kicked in, analyzing every angle, every escape route, every weakness in their formation. Her mind replayed the countless training scenarios she'd run through protecting governors and presidents. Stay calm, control the situation, strike hard, and don't stop until the threat is neutralized. If you're enjoying this intense scene, don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling content. But she waited. They hadn't made the first move yet, and she needed to be sure the threat was imminent. Her hands, seemingly relaxed at her sides, subtly shifted into position, ready for action. Years of standing between high-profile targets and potential threats had taught her the value of patience. Tank leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "This ain't a game, lady. Give us the damn bag, or we're gonna show you what happens when you don't respect your betters." Alexandra met his gaze, her voice like steel. "You're going to regret this." The confrontation exploded in an instant. Tank lunged forward, his massive frame moving with surprising speed. But Alexandra was faster, years of protective detail work having honed her reflexes to razor sharpness. She sidestepped his attack with fluid grace, using his momentum against him. Her first strike was precise and devastating, targeting pressure points she'd learned in Secret Service training. Tank stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, his face contorting with rage and disbelief. The others hesitated for a moment, their confidence shaken by the unexpected display of skill. Stay with us for this intense confrontation. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. "Get her!" Tank roared and his crew moved in. Patchy Beard came at her from the left, while one of the younger men circled to her right. Alexandra moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent years anticipating and neutralizing threats. Her blocks were clean, her counterstrikes precise. She didn't waste energy on flashy moves. This wasn't about showing off. It was about ending the threat quickly and decisively. The younger man swung wildly, but Alexandra caught his arm, using his momentum to send him sprawling into patchy beard. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs and curses. Tank, having recovered his balance, charged again, but Alexandra was ready. She met his charge with a series of swift, calculated strikes. Techniques she'd perfected protecting diplomats and government officials. Each hit found its mark with surgical precision, targeting vulnerable points that would incapacitate without causing permanent damage. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to stay updated. The fight was intense but brief. Within minutes, Tank and his crew lay groaning on the ground, their bravado shattered. Alexandra stood over them, her breathing controlled, her stance still ready for any further threat. In the distance, police sirens began to wail. "Next time," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Pick your targets more carefully." As the police cars pulled up, their lights painting the scene in flashing red and blue, Alexandra straightened her clothing and retrieved her bag. Officer Michael Rodriguez stepped out of the lead car, his hand resting cautiously on his holster. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, taking in the scene before him. "I'm fine," Alexandra replied calmly. "These gentlemen decided to try their luck today. It didn't work out for them." Rodriguez's eyes widened slightly as recognition set in. "Wait, aren't you former Secret Service? Governor Wilson's detail," Alexandra confirmed. "And I think these men have a lot to answer for. This wasn't random." The fluorescent lights of the police station hummed overhead as Alexandra sat across from Officer Rodriguez, her posture professional and alert. The adrenaline from the park confrontation had faded, replaced by the familiar focus she'd relied on during her years protecting high-profile targets. "Let's start from the beginning, Ms. Carter," Rodriguez said, flipping open his notebook. "You mentioned this wasn't random. What made you so sure?" Alexandra leaned forward, her voice steady. "Their approach was too coordinated. These weren't just street thugs looking for an easy mark. They had a system, a practiced routine. I've seen it before during my time with the Secret Service. Organized groups targeting specific individuals. If you're finding this investigation intriguing, don't forget to subscribe for more." "Tell me more about their leader," Rodriguez pressed. "The one they called Tank." "Marcus Wilson goes by Tank," Alexandra replied. "His crew's been operating in this area for months, but they're just the muscle. Someone's pulling their strings, and I intend to find out who." Later that evening, Alexandra sat in her home office, surrounded by files and digital records. Her laptop screen glowed with police reports and news articles, while her phone buzzed with messages from former Secret Service contacts. She'd called in every favor she could, leveraging relationships built during years of protecting the state's most powerful figures. Her old partner from the governor's detail, Jason Mitchell, had sent her an encrypted file containing surveillance photos and background checks. "Tank's crew has connections to some serious players," his message read. "Be careful, Alex. These people have friends in high places. Stay tuned as we uncover this deep conspiracy. Hit subscribe to follow the investigation." Alexandra's investigation led her to Catherine Reynolds, an investigative journalist who'd been tracking similar incidents across the city. They met in a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. "These attacks aren't isolated," Catherine explained, sliding a thick folder across the table. "I've documented dozens of cases, all targeting minorities, all following the same pattern. But every time I get close to exposing the truth, evidence disappears and witnesses go silent." Alexandra studied the documents, her trained eye-catching details others might miss. "They're creating fear, systematic intimidation. But why? What's the endgame?" Catherine leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Follow the money. After each incident, property values drop, businesses close, and suddenly new development companies swoop in. It's gentrification through terror." Using her Secret Service clearance, Alexandra accessed financial records that painted a disturbing picture. A network of shell companies, all leading back to one name: Richard Stanford, a prominent real estate developer with political aspirations. This conspiracy goes deeper than anyone imagined. Subscribe to see how it unfolds. Working late into the night, Alexandra connected with Claire Thompson, a former Treasury agent she'd worked with on the governor's security detail. Stanford's companies are just the tip of the iceberg, Claire revealed during a secure video call. There's a whole shadow network of funding behind these hate groups. They're using legitimate businesses as fronts. The investigation took Alexandra through a maze of financial transactions and corporate entities. Each discovery revealed new layers of corruption, reaching into the highest levels of city government. Tank's crew wasn't just a gang. They were hired thugs, doing the dirty work for powerful people who wanted to reshape the city through fear and violence. "We need to move carefully," Officer Rodriguez warned during their next meeting. "Stanford has friends in the department. One wrong move and this whole investigation could disappear. The truth is about to be revealed. Subscribe to witness justice being served." Alexandra's Secret Service training had taught her the value of patience and precision. She built her case methodically, gathering evidence that couldn't be ignored or buried. Security camera footage, financial records, witness statements piece by piece. She constructed a narrative that exposed the entire operation. But Stanford's organization was watching. Late one night, as Alexandra left the police station, she noticed two black SUVs following her. Instead of heading home, she led them on a complex route through the city, using evasive driving techniques she'd learned protecting the governor. "They're getting nervous," she told Catherine during a secure meeting. "We must be getting close to something big." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Tank's younger crew members, facing serious charges, decided to talk. His testimony opened up new avenues of investigation, revealing meetings, payoffs, and direct orders from Stanford's organization. Don't miss the next part of this explosive investigation. Subscribe now. Alexandra worked tirelessly, coordinating with Rodriguez and federal authorities. Her years in the Secret Service had taught her how to build an airtight case, and she applied every lesson to this investigation. The evidence was mounting, and Stanford's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. But the most dangerous part of the investigation was still to come. Stanford and his associates wouldn't go down without a fight, and they had resources that made Tank's crew look amateur by comparison. Alexandra knew she was painting a target on her back, but she pressed forward. Justice demanded nothing less. The dimly lit conference room at the federal building buzzed with tension as Alexandra spread documents across the table. FBI agent Marcus Chen, a veteran of financial crimes, studied the evidence she'd gathered. Catherine Reynolds sat nearby, her laptop open to a database of shell companies and suspicious transactions. "Stanford's network is sophisticated," Alexandra explained, pointing to a complex diagram of corporate entities. "He's using legitimate businesses to funnel money to groups like Tank's crew. Each attack creates panic, property values plummet, and his development companies move in. If you're following this intense investigation, make sure to subscribe for updates." Agent Chun nodded grimly. "This goes beyond hate crimes. We're looking at organized crime, money laundering, and possible RICO violations. But Stanford's lawyers will fight every step of the way." "That's why we need Tank," Alexandra replied. "He's the direct link between the street-level violence and Stanford's organization. If we can get him to flip, we can bring down the entire network." The investigation moved into high gear. Alexandra's Secret Service training proved invaluable as she coordinated with multiple agencies. She knew how to protect sources, secure evidence, and anticipate the moves of powerful adversaries. Late one evening, as she reviewed surveillance footage with Catherine, a breakthrough emerged. "Look at this," Catherine said, freezing a frame showing Tank meeting with one of Stanford's executives. "This proves direct contact between Stanford's organization and the street crews. The pieces are falling into place. Subscribe to see justice served." Alexandra's phone buzzed. A secure message from Officer Rodriguez. "Tank's ready to talk. His lawyers negotiating a deal." The interrogation room was cold and stark as Alexandra faced Tank across the metal table. Gone was his earlier bravado, replaced by the haunted look of a man who knew he was trapped. "Stanford's going to burn you," Alexandra said quietly. "You're nothing but a disposable tool to him. Help us bring him down, or you'll take the fall alone." Tank's resistance crumbled as Alexandra laid out the evidence. He revealed meetings, payment structures, and direct orders from Stanford's lieutenants. Each detail added another layer to the conspiracy. But Stanford wasn't going down easily. His organization had infiltrated key positions throughout the city. Evidence disappeared from police lockup, witnesses changed their stories, and pressure mounted to shut down the investigation. This conspiracy runs deeper than anyone imagined. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now. Alexandra called in every favor she'd earned during her Secret Service years. Former colleagues provided security for witnesses, while federal agents protected crucial evidence. She worked around the clock, knowing that any delay gave Stanford's people time to cover their tracks. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Claire Thompson, analyzing financial records, discovered a pattern of irregular payments from Stanford's main company to offshore accounts. "These transfers align perfectly with the attacks," she explained. "It's the smoking gun we needed." Alexandra coordinated with Agent Chun to set up surveillance on Stanford's key lieutenants. Her experience protecting VIPs had taught her how to track movements and identify patterns. Within days, they had documented meetings between Stanford's executives and other hate group leaders. The net is closing in. Subscribe to witness the final takedown. Catherine's investigative work added another crucial layer. She'd uncovered internal emails showing Stanford's direct knowledge of the attacks. He wasn't just funding them, she revealed. He was orchestrating them, choosing targets, timing, everything. As the evidence mounted, Alexandra noticed increased surveillance on her movements. Black SUVs followed her home, and mysterious figures watched her apartment. Instead of hiding, she used counter-surveillance techniques learned from years of protective detail work. "They're scared," she told Rodriguez during a secure meeting. "Stanford knows we're close. He's trying to intimidate us into backing off." The final piece fell into place when one of Stanford's junior executives agreed to cooperate. His testimony provided direct evidence of Stanford's involvement in planning and funding the attacks. The stage is set for justice. Subscribe for the dramatic conclusion. Alexandra worked with federal prosecutors to build an airtight case. Every piece of evidence was meticulously documented and secured. She knew from her Secret Service experience that taking down powerful figures required absolute precision. The indictment, when it came, was comprehensive. Stanford, his key executives, and several corrupt officials were charged with multiple federal crimes. The evidence trail Alexandra had built was too strong to ignore or dismiss. But the most dangerous phase was still ahead. Stanford's organization had resources and connections they hadn't yet revealed. As the arrest warrants were prepared, Alexandra knew they had to move quickly and decisively. "We only get one shot at this," she told the assembled task force. "Stanford's people will destroy evidence and disappear witnesses if they get any warning. We have to take them all down simultaneously." Dawn broke over the city as dozens of federal agents and police officers gathered for the final briefing. Alexandra stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention just as it had during her years on the governor's protective detail. "Richard Stanford's organization has terrorized our communities for too long," she began. "Today we end it. Each team has their assigned targets. Stanford and his executives must be arrested simultaneously to prevent evidence destruction. If you're invested in seeing justice served, don't forget to subscribe." The operation was massive, coordinated with military precision. Alexandra rode with Agent Chen's team, heading for Stanford's penthouse office. Her Secret Service training had prepared her for high-stakes operations, but this was personal. As their vehicles approached Stanford's building, Alexandra noticed private security teams taking defensive positions. "They're expecting us," she warned. "Stanford must have sources inside the department." The raid erupted into chaos. Stanford's security forces resisted, but federal agents had every exit covered. Alexandra moved through the building with practiced efficiency, leading a team toward Stanford's private elevator. "He's running," crackled a voice over the radio. Underground parking structure. The tension builds. Subscribe to see how this unfolds. Alexandra knew the building's layout from weeks of surveillance. She directed teams to cut off escape routes while she and Agent Chun descended to the parking level. Stanford's luxury sedan was already speeding toward the exit. But Alexandra had anticipated this. Police vehicles blocked every exit, while hidden spike strips waited to shred the sedan's tires. Stanford's escape attempt ended before it began. As agents surrounded the vehicle, Alexandra approached the driver's side. Stanford sat there, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Richard Stanford," she announced clearly. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and orchestrating hate crimes. You have the right to remain silent. Justice is being served. Subscribe for more thrilling conclusions." The evidence seized from Stanford's offices exceeded their expectations. Hidden files revealed the full scope of his operation, detailed plans for terrorizing communities, laundering money, and corrupting officials. In the following weeks, Alexandra worked tirelessly with prosecutors to prepare for trial. Her experience protecting governors had taught her how powerful figures operated, and she knew Stanford would use every resource to fight the charges. The courthouse was packed as the trial began. Catherine sat in the press section, while Officer Rodriguez and Agent Chun watched from the gallery. Alexandra took the stand early, her testimony clear and unshakable. "Stanford didn't just fund these attacks," she testified. "He created a systematic campaign of terror designed to drive people from their homes for profit. The truth is being revealed. Don't miss out. Subscribe now." Stanford's high-priced defense team tried to discredit her, but Alexandra's Secret Service background gave her testimony added weight. Tank and other former crew members testified next, revealing the direct orders they'd received from Stanford's organization. The financial evidence was damning. Claire's analysis showed millions flowing through shell companies to fund hate groups across the region. Every transaction, every meeting, every attack was documented and presented to the jury. As the trial progressed, more of Stanford's associates turned against him. His carefully constructed empire crumbled as lieutenants and executives rushed to make deals with prosecutors. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. Alexandra stood with Catherine and Rodriguez as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. Stanford's face remained stoic, but his hands trembled as he was led away. Stay tuned for the aftermath. Subscribe to see what happens next. In the days that followed, Alexandra worked to ensure Stanford's network was completely dismantled. Property was returned to rightful owners, and community rebuilding efforts began. "You've done something remarkable," Catherine told her during their final meeting. "You didn't just stop Stanford, you exposed the whole system that enabled him." Alexandra thought back to that day in the park, when Tank and his crew thought they'd found an easy target. "Sometimes," she replied, "the people you underestimate are the ones who bring you down." The city began to heal. Tank and his crew served reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, while Stanford faced decades in federal prison. More importantly, his conviction sent a message. No one was above justice. This story may be ending, but more are coming. Subscribe to stay updated. Alexandra returned to the park bench where it all began. The autumn breeze rustled through trees that had witnessed the first confrontation. She thought about her years in the Secret Service protecting the powerful. Now she had protected something even more important, the right of every person to live without fear. Her phone buzzed, another case, another chance to make a difference. Alexandra smiled as she stood, straightening her jacket. Her fight for justice wasn't over. It was just beginning. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and redemption.